Welcome to Old Guy Tech,
the OGT.TV recording studio.
Technology for the rest of us.
Hi, this is Rob Charney, Old Guy Tech TV Interviews, and we're here today with Michael Ranalli, running for District 4 Supervisor in El Dorado County. And Michael, I want to thank you very much for coming into Old Guy Tech TV.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And you know what? I always start out with everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for running. In the process, and you'll see everyone in our interviews, I just thank you for taking the time to take the effort to run, because this is how our country operates, and people forget. And we have a lot of disenfranchised voters out there that say, hey, you know what, my vote doesn't count, and that's not the case. And especially in a county race, you know, it's very important, from school board, supervisor to sheriff to whatever it may be. It's important that everybody votes. But what's the most important part is that somebody runs. And so, Michael, I want to thank you very much for running for office. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I bet you've been hopping.
It's been very busy. It's been a fast-paced process.
Yeah.
And I think it's going very well.
Well, that's great. So let's get into the basics a little bit here. Why don't you tell me a little bit about Michael and, you know, why you've decided to run?
Okay, well, Michael Ranalli, District 4 candidate, and I have lived in El Dorado County, been a tax-paying resident for 30 years, all in the district that I'm running for. And
which is?
District 4.
Right.
And I've spent close to 40 successful years in the business sector, including 22 years with Intel Corporation. My wife of 20 years and I lived in rescue for many years before moving to Lotus, where we're developing a small vineyard.
That's great.
So, you know, having worked at Intel for that many years, I know what it takes to create jobs and work within a budget. As you likely know, Intel is a very competitive and demanding company.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very successful career there, and I believe that a lot of what I discovered and what I learned there is very translatable to the job as a board of supervisor. And if I could, I'd offer a couple of examples. You know, we spent a lot of time building factories here in the United States, and
right.
and also on different continents, cultures, and across different languages. And in order to operate successfully, you have to develop a lot of communication skills, and it takes quite a bit of patience and skills that, you know, in my younger days I did not have and had to develop in order to be successful
right.
in those environments. People have to trust you. You have to be sensitive to their culture, and you have to discover and develop listening skills.
Right.
And that's translatable, I believe, to El Dorado County and District 4, because we're a very diverse county.
Right.
And if you talk to the citizens of El Dorado Hills compared to those citizens in Cameron Park, Shingle Springs, or more isolated places like Mosquito or Volcanoville, Georgetown, Upcountry, Cool Pilot Hill, Coloma Lotus, you will find a lot of diversity. And I've discovered, as I've talked to people and listened to people, that many of their hopes are similar for our county, but their fears and their issues vary from region to region. And, you know, of course, there's some overarching ones that everybody is worried about, you know, fire protection, law enforcement, and like that.
Right.
But, you know, the folks in El Dorado Hills are more sensitive to overdevelopment and traffic on their roads.
Mm-hmm.
And, the citizens of Cameron Park and Shingle Springs, they're fearful of that El Dorado Hills density creeping up into their region.
Right.
And so their fears are more, for what's going to happen, not what has happened.
Right.
And as I mentioned, places like Mosquito, Georgetown, Upcountry, they're on the timberline. Mm-hmm. And so their preoccupations tend to be more about fire safety mm-hmm. and response time of law enforcement. And so I think that it's important to understand the issues across the county and across the district, and be mindful of those, and be prepared to have a platform and a vision that addresses those fears and hopes. On the hope side, quality of life is something that has attracted a lot of folks to El Dorado County. And the loss or the potential loss or fear of losing that quality of life is consistent across the county. And I found that to be universally true. Everybody wants jobs for their children, and people are worried about when they get older and they can no longer weed whack that fire safe perimeter around their property or chainsaw that tree that fell on their driveway. Where can they afford to live?
Right.
And so it's very challenging. And so the things that were my call to action, because I have a business background, were those things related to our economic challenges and the job circumstances here in our county. And for many years, my wife is a first responder and Red Cross volunteer, and she asked me for quite a few years, what are you going to do? How are you going to contribute to your community and your county? And it took me a while to figure out that my background in business was really helpful here. So I got involved in the regulatory reform effort and our Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee, and proud to be the vice chair of that committee for the last couple of years. Of course, having done a business plan for the vineyard, I became very aware of the challenges for farmers and ranchers and small businesses, which relates back to the agricultural challenges
Sure.
and the regulatory challenges. So those are some of my interests. I believe that I have a lot of applicable skills. I believe I'm at a place in my life where I have the time, and so there's a very strong obligation to try and help our community at the next level, and that would be the Board of Supervisors. And if the voters say yes, then I will work hard to contribute, and if they say no, I can continue my volunteer work as I have.
Sure. So you did mention you have some experience sitting on boards. One of the things that I think it's really important is that if you're interested in running for an office that involves something as much as the Board of Supervisors, you need some experience to understand how boards work. You need to understand the Brown Act. You need to understand what you can't do. And I was fortunate enough to sit on many different boards. I was chairman of the Transportation Commission, chairman of Transit Authority. I was sergeant at arms of the grand jury. I was the chairman of the Fish and Game Commission. So it always interests me when somebody new comes along and says, hey, you know what, I want to run and become a supervisor or a supervisor for a district. And I always go, that's great. So what's your experience? Well, I ran my neighborhood watch. Doesn't cut it with me anymore at this stage. So you've got some experience, and you were talking about that now. Is that, and you said you worked for Intel. So you feel that job set will work well moving into supervisor?
I do, but there's another part to this. But before we go there, first of all, thank you for your service to the community. It's a challenging job, and
Yes.
And when you get into some of those boards and commissions, you'll find that not everybody's happy with the mission and purpose of those, and it can be somewhat unpopular. And many times, in most cases, you're a volunteer just trying to help your community.
That's right.
But following my the creation of my business plan for the vineyard, I started going to Board of Supervisor meetings, Planning Commission meetings, Agricultural Commission meetings, budget hearings, and I did this for 3.5 years. I was part of no interest group. I sat by myself. I printed out that board package and I read it through the weekend, and I went to the meeting to try and understand how things got done. And I had a very specific mission. We read about and you hear very often when things don't work in our county, but you don't always often hear about when things work
Exactly.
correctly.
People will concentrate on the negative.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I know that there are circumstances when that occurred, but I wanted to witness it for myself.
Sure.
I also heard, and we've all read the history of our county and some of the dubious past. I wanted to know who was in the room, what were their interests, what kind of influence did they have, And you know, you can't do that in one meeting. You have to go to meeting after meeting and make those observations over a period of time. So I did that, as I said, planning commission, agricultural meetings. So I watched how the boards operated. I became very, very sensitive to how important it was to really thoroughly read those board packages and understand the content of that material. That's not easy because we're a diverse county and we got diverse issues,
Yeah.
and those problems range from, you know, barking dogs, you know, neighbors barking dogs, to
Right.
you know, transportation and circulation issues and land use and zoning issues.
There's a lot involved, and a lot of people don't realize how much there is involved into it. So you're absolutely right. You know, you sit on a commission or you sit on a board, and particularly when when you're sitting on the board of supervisors, your weekly packet's going to be this thick.
Absolutely.
I mean, and to spend the time to go through all that and educate yourself is very important, but very time consuming.
Very time consuming.
So, do you feel, especially with starting a new vineyard, are you going to be able to give your all to this position?
Absolutely. You know, the scale and scope of our vineyard is small enough that it will not be a full-time task. You know, considering how much travel and work I did at Intel,
Yeah.
it seems like a relatively light load.
I suppose so.
As a matter of fact, my wife said to me, you know, putting around on your tractor and watching Murder, She Wrote and Matlock's not going to cut it in this house. So what else are you going to do? So
Your wife really cracks the whip, doesn't she?
I'm very proud of her.
Good for her.
Yeah, she sets a very high standard in our house. But there was another component to sitting through all of those meetings, and that was you had the benefit of hearing the public. And they come to the podium in 3-minute increments, and they express their fears. And, you know, commissioners and board members need to be extremely patient in listening to them, and following up on what they hear from those citizens. Oftentimes it's many of the same people. Oftentimes it is not. Sometimes they come and they're experts in a particular area, and they will cite an area of our county charter or our general plan, and that's very helpful because you can leave the room, and I have, and I did, went and researched that.
Sure.
And so I had the opportunity to compare what I read to what I heard from that individual at the podium.
Right.
That's also a very, very helpful, you know,
It is.
Practice for leading up to whether or not you're even able to be on a board or a commission. So we really haven't gotten to that point. So, you know, I approached having that background in business and realizing that we were in pretty dire economic environment here
Sure.
in El Dorado
Right.
County, and have been for a very long time.
Yes.
It was the interest of the regulatory reform and the interest of the Community and Economic Development Advisory Committee that caught my interest. And so I went back and I researched all their meeting minutes, back as far as, the early 2000s. I wanted to see who were the participants, what were the issues, and more importantly, what have we been able to get done. But that still fell short, in my opinion. You know, we have a general plan. It has an economic element, which is really more of a framework, a concept for economic development. I went and pursued every strategic plan that was written for El Dorado County that I could find, that I could dig up. Some of them I had to find from the archives at some of our chambers. Some of them were strategic plans that were done, like from the El Dorado Hills Foundation. I read those strategic plans cover to cover, and every single one of them had one consistent theme, one underlying limitation for our county, and that was the regulatory environment, and the fact that we had adopted a general plan that had not been implemented. And so when we arrived at a point where our Board of Supervisors, 2010, embarked on a very thorough 5-year mandated review of our general plan, I was keenly aware of and participated in that process. I wanted to know what were the findings, what did we feel were the limiters, and what were the things that we felt like we had to go and fix. And so, you know, knowing that strategic plans have a very short life, you have to revise them periodically because technology changes.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, and so if the regulatory environment was consistently holding us back, if we didn't deal with that, doing another strategic plan had very serious limitations. So my discovery and the call to action for me was that we need in our county a strong and diverse economy in order to support our schools and update our roads and infrastructure. A strong and diverse economy is what will provide the funding necessary for law enforcement in our fire protection districts, leading back to those fears that citizens have. But it's important to have diversity. And so when you talk about the creation of jobs or trying to improve the economic climate of our county, you cannot look at one industry sector or one business segment in order to carry the water for our future.
Right.
Of course, I had done the business plan on the vineyard, and I had become very aware of the market trends and the agricultural crop reports that our ag commissioner reports out to our board of supervisors every year. You know, I think our last agricultural crop report had something like $47 million in gross crop value, but it had an economic impact of $366 million. So it's not just about the jobs the lower paying jobs that may be on a farm or a ranch.
Right.
It has to do with the gentleman that's selling the tractor to
Right.
right. So there are these connecting industries that have a very significant economic impact. But it's not just agriculture. It's recreation and tourism. And if you go around the country and go around the state of California, you will find that those rural counties, they most capable of diversifying and stabilizing a rural economy with agriculture, recreation, and tourism. But again, those market segments alone, those business segments alone, will not do it for our county. And that leads me to the biotech, the med tech, the clean tech. And that's really where my background in business was.
Right.
So, you know, having been involved with the very first group that moved up from the Bay Area, and I'm not originally from the Bay Area, I'm from a western Pennsylvania steel town.
Okay.
Intel came to Pennsylvania and interviewed, and they were seeking what they told me was a work ethic. And, you know, we had a declining steel town, and the jobs were pretty limited, and Silicon Valley was taking off. And I did well in the interview, and I had a job at the time.
Right.
I was working in television, working all night, and going to school during the day, and they liked that. So when I had the opportunity to get out of the Bay Area and move to the Folsom site,
Good for you.
I considered it a great escape.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I was part of the group that was involved in some site selection for Intel. And we had the spreadsheet from hell, if I can say that, that evaluated different areas and the capabilities to be able to support marketing jobs, engineering jobs, and
Right.
manufacturing jobs. And of course, Folsom ultimately emerged as a critical site for some very understandable reasons. They were very business friendly. They were highly motivated. You know, the state of California was very anxious to help put in the interchange that got you off Highway 50 into those facilities that ended up being, you know, 7 or more buildings. But in the early stages, you know, my engineering group, we were in trailers on Lake Forest Drive, running air conditioners at full blast to keep the equipment cool until those buildings were built. So
Right.
we were very relieved to get into those buildings.
You know, it's interesting. I watched that selection on locations, and one of the things that really bothers me with El Dorado County is for so long we have been business unfriendly. My understanding is El Dorado County was looked at as well as Folsom at the time, and it came down to almost as simple as, well, how can you help us come into your county? And it was driving me crazy because our board of supervisors at that particular time were very short-sighted. They didn't see the bigger picture. And it bothers me. I mean, there's opportunities. Why are businesses leaving California now? They're leaving California now because other states are willing to do the heavy lifting to get them started. The road improvements, the tax breaks, all the other things that are needed to keep, you know, bring or attract an industry, particularly a kind of a green industry, into their area. And we did just the opposite. It's been the history of El Dorado County of saying, we don't really want you here, go away. And from what I'm hearing, and I believe you and I are thinking the same way, we need to figure out a way in El Dorado County. We have this beautiful business park in El Dorado Hills. There's a lot of room there to do a lot of things. So do you feel that it's important that we try to attract these businesses in here?
Absolutely. I think, in retrospect, the circumstance with Intel at the time, it certainly looks very short-sighted. From this vantage point,
Well, yeah.
it was more of it seemed like they took a more of a passive approach to attracting a company like Intel, and that was in fact short-sighted. Folsom was very aggressive. They told Intel, we need a fire station and a fire tender. Intel fixed that.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And Intel said, we need roads and water and sewer, and they fixed that.
Yep.
And so, in the long haul, everybody benefited.
Yeah.
And we could have and should have too. But the business parks is very interesting that you mentioned that, because part of the this discovery that I had during the regulatory effort was that we have an employment cap on our business park in El Dorado Hills. Now we've got business assets in this county that are grossly underutilized.
Right.
The El Dorado Hills Business Park is one. Barnett Business Park in Shingle Springs is another.
Right.
We've got the Placerville one off of Enterprise Drive. You also have Georgetown Airport, Placerville Airport. A tech company that's considering a location, they have to look at the transportation opportunities as
Absolutely.
well.
Right.
And they have to look at water and sewer and those infrastructure things. And so if we're short-sighted about that, we will have difficulty attracting them. But there's other components that are very, very necessary. That employment cap on the business park is a job-crushing restriction for El Dorado Hills Business Park.
Right.
And I seem to recall during the implementation or during the creation of our general plan, there were 4 alternatives that were proposed because at the time there was no improvements to the interchange there at Latrobe Road.
Right.
It was a very significant restriction.
Yes.
But it was one we should have anticipated and planned to fix in order to create the opportunities for the business park that was already there. So if I recall, there were 4 alternatives that were proposed to deal with the limitations on the business park. The one that was selected was the employment cap, which was, in my opinion, the most short-sighted.
Absolutely.
One of the other alternatives that I thought was the best one was a congestion management plan. I actually think that there's state law that says you're supposed to do a regional congestion management plan.
Yes.
Now, had we taken that path, we would have been able to use that plan to help inform the necessary infrastructure and road improvements that would have
Right.
helped our CIP, our capital improvement process,
Right.
and would have benefited us and put us on the steps necessary to enable that business park to fill it up with willing tech companies, med tech companies, and clean tech companies. But we did not do that.
Right.
So we have this restriction. We have an environmental analysis that has been done on that restriction, and we hope to fix that very soon. And that was, one of the recommendations that came from our committee that was included in the general plan update process. But of course, to do that responsibly, you have to evaluate the environmental impacts, and we have that environmental impact report.
Right.
But there's more. There's more to attracting businesses than just enabling the business parks. Our county periodically does a very thorough inventory on the commercial and the industrial and lands that are available in our county. We have to do that and integrate that information in an online way, perhaps with our new county web portal, so that it's available to prospective companies. They need to know where the commercial land is, what you're allowed to do on that land, and what's close to it. What's the status of the infrastructure, the water and the sewer and the roads that are near there? And I think that if we did a comprehensive strategic plan, I believe that we can get to those elements that will make us more attractive. But there's still, in my opinion, a more overarching issue about our friendliness towards business.
Right. Right.
We have had a history in our county as being very reactive. We take projects, we take issues on a project-by-project, case-by-case basis. And that's a problem. That's known by our regional neighbors, and that's known by prospective business ventures. And that's not a very attractive, business-friendly environment to be in. They want to know what you can do on a particular parcel.
Right.
They want a process that is well spelled out, so you know not only what the fees are, but how long it takes to get through that process. They've got a business plan to execute. If we're not sensitive to that, we've already limited our ability to attract businesses and actually retain the ones that we have.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I talk to so many people out there that have family, children in particular, that they would love to be able to keep in El Dorado County. But the fact is the jobs aren't there. And we are very business unfriendly. Even in my own little case, one of the things that I hate about California is this unsecured business tax. You've already paid taxes on everything already, and now the county says, "Well, but we want to be able to tax you on what you have to run your business as well." I've never seen a bigger business killer than the continuation of taxing the existing businesses than what we've got here in El Dorado County, right? It's crazy. And so my emphasis in what I'm trying to do is that make sure that the right people get in the office that understand that point of view and have an ability to say, hey, I'm going to look at and study what we can do to attract and keep businesses in El Dorado County. And I'm not just talking the big box stores. Bless those big box stores because they hire a lot of people, keep a lot of people kind of getting food in their mouths. But the reality is it's not a career type of job. It's not something that's going to be long-term that they're going to be able to raise their 2, 3, 4 kids on type of situation. We need skilled businesses in here, and we need an ability to train these people to work in these jobs.
I agree.
Yeah, and we really need to do that.
Well, you just identified three important things. I'm not an expert on the unsecured tax. It seemed it would be a very good question for our treasurer tax collector
Yes.
for the county. But it would seem to me unsecure means that it's something not attached to the property, right? Maybe a boat or an RV or business equipment, as you
It's business
suggested,
equipment mostly, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I look forward to understanding that a little bit better. But on the sales tax matter and the issue of big box stores, I'm not a huge fan of big box stores. Within moderation and in the right location and with the right public input and participation, certainly when you talk to people, there's pushback about certain types of big box stores. But unanimously, people seem to like something like a Trader Joe's,
Yeah.
But our county has $800 million in sales tax leakage to neighboring
Absolutely.
counties. Absolutely. And there are some limitations in how much of that you can fix. Folsom, El Dorado Hills' proximity to Folsom is going to make it very challenging to not attract folks a few miles to those retail opportunities that are there. But I did a Buxton report. If you're familiar with the Buxton report, it tracks credit card sales outside of your zip codes.
Right.
And I wanted to look at the zip codes that were cool, Pilot Hill, Georgetown, Garden Valley. Those areas not likely to travel to Folsom as a first choice, more likely to go to Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know how much retail opportunity existed, and how much were we leaking. And the answers were this: there's $220-some million of retail opportunities from those zip codes alone.
Mm-hmm.
60 million is captured locally, and that's because we got some good hardware stores, we got some good feed stores,
right.
We've got
Right.
2 really solid markets,
right.
One in Cool and one in Georgetown. Without those businesses, everything else would be leaking out of the county.
Exactly.
So there's opportunity for us. And the North County is uniquely challenged because they lack some infrastructure and a compact sewer plant. When you have commercial land or R&D land, and you also have to accommodate on that land a septic system, you've now really eaten into your opportunity to be able to have a job center with a lot of paying jobs.
Right.
So, we've got a lot of problems, but we also have a lot of opportunities to capture that sales tax leakage here. But I'm not so quick to jump to big box stores as a way to solve that. Those Buxton reports tell you specifically what items people were leaving the county to. I mean, shoes. I mean, it says.
Yeah.
And so, there's an opportunity for us to fix that. When you consider that we've got, a discretionary county fund that is $250 million, to think that we have $800 million in sales tax leakage seems to be very, very high on this fix-it list.
Yes,
and so it's not necessarily about the jobs the high-paying jobs that they would bring. It's more about capturing that tax base here locally.
Exactly.
And so we spend a lot of time in our county worrying about fearing excessive development. And we don't spend sufficient time working on diversifying our economy so that we can wean ourselves off of residential development as the sole method for revenues for our county. And so I think we need to balance our efforts on economic improvements and job creation and home occupations, and move away from obsessing over those numbers. And I think there ought to be a sense of urgency. It was my call to action, and part of my frustration has been how difficult it has been to keep the focus and to remain and follow through on those initiatives.
I make an example with most people that come up in front here, and it just bothers me dearly as a Ford fan, is that El Dorado County doesn't have a Ford store, which it did for 40-some years.
Yeah.
Until the wrong person took over the business and threw it in the ground. And that's just one example. I mean, that's an example of a business that can employ somebody that's actually a career opportunity for many people, and has a huge tax impact on El Dorado County with very little traffic impact on top of it. And it's those type of jobs that I think we need to attract. And you're absolutely right about the limitation in the business park. I mean, it's just crazy. And everybody I've talked to running for District 4 and District 5, they all agree to a certain point that, yes, we need to do something. But they're also very sensitive to keeping the rural lifestyle the way it is in El Dorado County. And I truly believe we need a good balance between the two. We already have some very good housing areas already mapped out, already ready to be shovel-ready projects, let alone what's left in Serrano and those other areas, and as well as all the empty homes that are still there from the Great Recession. And my opinion, studying the numbers, is that homes do not help a county in the long run. In the long run, homes in a county costs money. Fire protection, law enforcement protection, road maintenance, everything else that comes along with it. Homes are not the answer. They're a short-term solution, and they hire people for a short-term, but they're not the long-term solution. So what we need to do in El Dorado County, my opinion, is we need to look at the long-term solution, the career-style jobs. Big box stores, hate them, love them, whatever, they attract a lot of people. And as you mentioned, taxes are very important. That's what helps us grow in this county. And now we have another very serious issue. And we're going to run over time a little bit here, but I want your opinion on facilities. Because we have a number of buildings in El Dorado County that people are working in that you wouldn't want your kids to ever be in, let alone the fact that we've got a situation, we have a major situation with our police station, our sheriff's department. That's a big one. And there's many others, animal control. I mean, there's so many other situations with facilities. What's your ideas or solutions for those?
Well, reactive management is no way to deal with them. I can assure you of that. I have recently taken a tour of the senior center, which used to be the old hospital before Marshall. boy, is that a challenging building.
It's a disaster.
Very,
Yes.
very, very
Yeah.
difficult work environment for some vitally critical services for our county.
Yep.
It's heartbreaking to see.
Yep.
And I've also toured the sheriff's headquarters, which used to be the old jail.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that they put in a sprinkler system, and the oil that goes in those valves is now contaminated the drinking water system, and all the water has to be that they drink. I mean, this is some of our most critical county services.
Right.
I have two concerns. One is we need to be able to execute on things in this county with better follow through. If you make a building decision or a real estate decision, and it takes you too long, in the case of, say, the animal shelter, to follow through on that, the entire economy has changed, and the decision that you made 10 years ago looks awful. If we were able to execute on that within, before the economic climate changed,
Right.
you would have a different view of
Right.
it.
Right.
So we need to execute better. We need to take our facilities and our property management much more proactively and much more seriously. And I'm seeing some improvements occurring there. The sheriff's building is a very good example. They're fragmented across the county. That cost us money in their efficiency and their execution. But more importantly, there's like $32 million in lease costs associated
Exactly,
with that. And
yeah.
so it's going to cost us money to do nothing.
Right.
Now, what we do has to be thoughtful and well planned.
Right.
And the criticism about a Taj Mahal. I mean, I don't believe that our sheriff wants or desires a Taj Mahal.
No.
But we have a process, an approach that can make sure that it's done thoughtfully and within limits, and that we don't saddle our county with a lot of debt, because we don't have a lot of debt right now.
Right.
Our county budget's in pretty good shape year to year. Thanks to the sheriff returning a budget surplus
That's right.
each year. That's helped a whole lot. I'm proud that he's done that. I'm happy to say that
It's been fiscally very responsible.
yes, and that needs to be thought of through this process.
Sure.
On the other hand, if you look at the long-term slope of our revenues versus our appropriations, there's a gap, and a growing gap. So we have to be thoughtful about the debt that we may take on.
Right.
We have to, which gets back to diversifying our economy and having other sources of revenue.
Right.
We've got to be able to solve those problems. We got to be able to afford those buildings, and we certainly can't afford to do nothing.
Michael, it's having lived here since '82. I've watched the process for a long time, and it seems to be, we make a study. We get a group of people together. We appoint them to make a study on, let's even talk about facilities, because the jail situation is one that's been going on almost all the way back to '82. They've recognized for all these decades that they have a situation, yet even with the help of a group that's appointed to look at site selection, whatever it may be, they've never acted on it. And you know as well as I do, the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost us in the long run here. And we have a court situation that the courts are fighting as well. You talked about the senior center in the mental health facility. That building is falling down around them. We have so many issues with county facilities that you almost don't know where to start. The other issue that I also look at is right now our county budget looks really great until you look at the retirement numbers. Okay, the minute you look at that figure, it's absolutely frightening, and it seems to me that very few people are addressing that issue. And come after the primaries and you have an opportunity to come back in here, I'm hoping that's one of the areas we can really talk about, because people don't take the time to understand what that obligation is going to cost us in our future of our kids. I really appreciate you coming in here. We've run over our time for this interview, and I have a feeling you and I could sit here for a couple hours and probably talk about a lot of things that's going on with the county.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been good, and I'm glad you're able to get your message out there. One of the things we'll do is we'll provide you a link to this video so you can put it on your website.
Okay.
And I always tell everybody, make sure you put what your district is in there, and maybe even put in a little map of what that district is.
I have a really good one on my website.
Yeah, you need to do that because people really don't know what district they're in. My experience has been running a number of campaigns is that El Dorado Hills and Tahoe are disenfranchised with El Dorado County. El Dorado Hills people feel they live in Folsom, and I literally had a person tell me when I was knocking on doors that lived in El Dorado Hills that, oh no, we live in Folsom. Didn't even have a clue where she lived. And then, of course, we've got what's affectionately called as the Granite Curtain, and we have South Lake Tahoe issues as well. So El Dorado County is a very diverse area, and we didn't even touch on to the recreation value that we have here in this county. Huge dollars are brought in here, and there's all kinds of things that we can do as time goes on, and I'm really happy to see that you're looking into it and you're studying the issues and you're willing to bring it forward. I want to thank you again for coming on here with Old Guy Tech Interviews.
I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it.